purpose of this short video is to show you guys how to access the resources that pertain to the musical elements. But before we do that, let's look at some practical suggestions. First, I'm assuming that maybe a few of you know how to read music, and I'm assuming that probably most of you don't know how. Now, first of all, you guys don't have to know how to read music for this class. I'm not going to test you on it. If you're interested, however, it's in the first appendix that it shows you the names of the notes on the musical staff. So if you want to learn more about it, you can. So that being said, do practice listening to the music and listen to it over and over again. I think that you'll find the more that you listen to the music, the more you'll hear stuff and the more meaningful it will become. Also, it doesn't say this on the syllabus, but my personal agenda for you guys is to make concert goers out of you. And I really think that the more you can hear stuff, the more you'll enjoy the live performances. It might feel a little overwhelming going through the musical elements kind of quickly, as you'll see in the first, we're going to get through them in the first couple weeks of class. Please, just as long as you have a basic understanding of the musical elements, you should be in good shape. We do have all semester to hear the way the musical elements work. Okay, here we are in the shell, and I want you guys to look here where it says elements of music. Let me make this a little bit bigger. This is in the course menu. So I click on that. Here's where you're going to find the topics of discussion for the first couple weeks. So I click on Materials of Music Interactive. Now, I link to it by clicking on the elements of music, but I also put this inside the learning module, so you can find it in either place. Okay, I made the screen a little bit bigger here. Just to give you a heads up, if you did not log in yet, it's going to ask you to log in order to get to the materials here. So I already logged in, and the first thing that comes up is melody. And this is really the most important aspect of music. It's the part that we all sing along with. Unless you're a percussionist or you sang maybe alto or tenor in choir, melody is what a lot of us are tuned into. So this gives us the definition of melody when we click on it. So our book defines melody as a succession of single notes. And if you guys do learn how to read music, when you watch the melody, you'll see that it moves, it has a beginning, it moves, and it ends. And it's a series of notes. And we read melody kind of like we read our language, from left to right. Also, if you learn how to read music, you'll see that when the pitches are notated, not only are they given a defined pitch, but they're also given a defined duration. What we're going to be listening for regarding melody are things like what instrument has the melody. We'll be getting into instrument recognition next week. And also, we'll be listening for the way a melody moves. Like, for example, when you're going from one pitch to the next, is it moving in a small distance, or is it kind of jumping? This is called conjunct versus disjunct. If we go back to the defining melody page and we look down here at the bottom, here are examples of conjunct and disjunct. So, for example, I click on conjunct. And here we're given Beethoven's Ode to Joy. This is from his Ninth Symphony as an example. And you can just see this, that the notes are pretty close together. That's what makes this conjunct. With disjunct, you can even, before I play this, you can even see that there's more distance between the pitches that are in the melody. Another thing that we can listen for is style. If you're listening to a violin play a melody, you might be listening to whether the melody is being bowed or being plucked. That's called pizzicato when it's plucked. And yet another thing you can listen for in melody is how it's structured or put together. So I'll let you guys do this. You can check it out. When you click on the structure of melody, it gets into things like phrases and cadences. All right, Chapter 2 is about rhythm and meter. Now, most music that we listen to, probably most music that you guys listen to, has a feeling of beat. The beat is the basic unit of rhythm It's the regular pulse that divides music into equal segments. In my face-to-face classes, I'll play a piece of music and I'll ask the class to tap their feet so I can see where they hear the beat. And sometimes, well, often, we don't agree. So it's actually we can only say you're right or wrong once the music has been written down. So keep that in mind when you're listening for how the beats are organized. All right, here's a piece. I can't play too much of it because I don't want to get in trouble with copyright. So listen for where you think the beat is. Well, I guess I made that really obvious, didn't I? But when I play that in my face-to-face classes, that's usually where everybody taps their foot. And that's because you can hear the instrument, it sounds like the guitar, is playing on the beat. Sometimes my students will tap twice as fast or twice as slow, and that doesn't mean that they're wrong. So why did I put the picture of the loaf of bread here? Well, I put it here because if you think of the loaf of bread as being a span of time, you can cut it into slices that are thicker or thinner. The beat is, once you write it down, that's just what you're using as the basic unit of measurement. So once you establish where the beat is, then you can listen for rhythmic patterns. And most of the stuff, probably most of the stuff that you guys listen to has a feeling of pattern. Most music is organized into 2 beats, 3 beats, or 4 beats. And I'm going to play this piece again, or at least start it, and have you guys listen for how you think it's organized. So what you're going to want to listen for is a strong accented beat followed by unaccented beats. Let's try just counting groups of 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. That sort of works. Let's try groups of 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That sounds really awkward. Let's try groups of 4. I'm going to start this over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That actually works really well and even better than the groups of 2. What you guys are listening for is the accent pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What we were just listening for was the meter. The meter is the way the beats are grouped into regular patterns. So it's really important that when you're listening for meter, that when you're tapping your foot, and it's not so easy if you're not a trained musician, well, some of you actually might be natural to this, but what you really need to do is make sure that you're tapping your foot in a steady fashion. You don't want to suddenly go twice as fast or twice as slow. You want to keep it steady. Think of a beat as being like your heartbeat, beating regularly. Another way that you can listen for, or I should say watch for meter, is when you're at a concert that has a conductor, you can watch the beat pattern. What you're going to watch for is a downward gesture that the conductor will give. That will indicate the first beat of the group or measure. And then it's followed by unaccented beats. And when the conductor, he or she, returns to that downward gesture, you would count that as 1. So typically, you're going to hear 2, 3, or 4 beats per measure. Here we are back in the materials of Music Interactive. If I click on metrical patterns, and then I click on simple meter, this is really cool. You can practice listening for the difference between duple, triple, and quadruple, and it also gives a visual. So here's the example from Stars and Stripes being an example of duple meter. I just love these for practice. You guys can check that out. There's actually 2 things to listen for in meter, and I may be making this a little bit more detailed than you need, but just because sometimes different people get different answers when they're listening to something, I think this might help explain why. So what we were just listening for was the first thing is how many beats are there in the meter, in the grouping rather. How many beats are there? One way you can, if you're looking at a piece of music, and our book doesn't show you this, but I want to show you guys something called a time signature that maybe you've seen. A time signature is A symbol that's used in music. It usually consists of two numbers. Sometimes it looks like the letter C, but usually it's two numbers, one on top of the other, that tell the performer what note value is carrying the beat. And that's, we don't need to worry about like whether it's a quarter note or a half note or an eighth note, and that's the bottom number. And then it tells you how many beats there are per group. So a lot of times when you look at the time signature, the top number will tell you what kind of meter it is. So what we see here is actually an example of quadruple meter. The second thing to listen for in meter has to do with how the beat subdivides. Well, what does that mean? Subdivision is when you're hearing stuff that's in the music that's moving faster than the beat itself. So let me give you an example of that. Okay, well, we listened to this before, and you guys, I think, clearly hear the beat here. Now the beat's going to stay constant. Well, listen to what happens here in just a few seconds. Do you hear that background? It's moving twice as fast. Dun, 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 dun. It's moving twice as fast as the beat. That faster moving stuff is the subdivision of the beat. Now this usually happens in one of two ways. Either the beat can subdivide into multiples of two, like what we just heard, where the background was going twice as fast as the beat, or it can even go, 4 times as fast. In other words, in multiples of two. That's called simple meter. Or the beat can subdivide into multiples of 3. We haven't heard that yet, but that's called compound meter. If you go back to metrical patterns, you'll see examples of both simple and compound meter. So you can practice listening for them there. My best example for compound meter is row, row, row your boat. You guys sing with me. Ready? Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. So let's go through the two different ways to listen for meter. If we listen for how many beats there are, row, row, row your boat gently down the stream, you're probably going to come up with something like 2. 1, 2, 1 to 2, 1 to 2 to 1, 2. When we get to the merrily part, we can get to the second part of meter, that is, how does it subdivide? Merrily, 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 merrily. Well, it subdivides into 3s. So that's what makes this a compound, because it's subdividing into 3s. A compound duple, because there's actually 2 big beats per measure or group. That's what makes this a compound duple meter. All right, I always spend a little bit more time on the subdivision of the beat than our book goes into, but I hope that it helps this material make more sense. And one more thing I'd like to say about rhythm. I put some more resources in the course, the resources and materials folder in the week 1 module for you guys that want more practice. If you go to Hearing Meters, the Basics, I took this from a different textbook, but it goes through, excuse me, listening for some of these patterns. Also, if you scroll down, you'll see some optional videos that are also from a different textbook, but the lecturer, Craig Wright, goes into greater detail with really wonderful listening examples of these different aspects of melody, rhythm, and harmony.